The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves through Central Park as Marcus sat on the worn wooden bench, his pale hands clasped tightly in his lap. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another tired businessman taking a break from the chaos of New York City. But Marcus hadn't been truly tired in over 3 centuries, and the weight pressing down on his shoulders had nothing to do with work. He stared at the joggers passing by, their hearts beating steadily, pumping warm blood through their veins. Once, that sound would have driven him into a frenzy. Now, it just reminded him of everything he had lost. The hunger was still there, gnawing at him like an old wound, but he had learned to control it. What he couldn't control was the loneliness that had settled into his bones like winter frost. "Mister, are you okay?" Marcus looked up, startled. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, stood in front of him. She had dark curly hair tied back with a bright yellow ribbon and wore a school uniform that had seen better days. Her brown eyes held a wisdom that seemed far too old for her face. "I'm fine, child," Marcus said, his voice carrying the faint accent of his long-forgotten homeland. "Shouldn't you be in school?" The girl shrugged and sat down beside him without invitation. "School ended an hour ago. I'm waiting for Mom to pick me up, but she's probably still at work." She swung her legs back and forth, her sneakers not quite touching the ground. "I'm Sophia, by the way. Sophia Martinez." Marcus studied her carefully. There was something different about this child, something that made his ancient instincts prickle with awareness. She showed no fear, no hesitation in approaching a stranger. Most children these days were taught to be wary, and rightfully so. "Marcus," he said simply, deciding not to give his full name. Some names carried too much history. "That's a nice name," Sophia said with a bright smile. "You look really sad, Marcus." "Like, really, really sad. Sadder than my mom when she has to work double shifts at the hospital." The observation hit him like a physical blow. In all his years of walking among humans, few had ever seen past his carefully constructed facade. This child had managed it in mere minutes. "Your mother works at a hospital?" Marcus asked, deflecting from her too perceptive comment. "She's a nurse," Sophia said proudly. "She saves people every day." "Well, she helps save them. She always says the doctors get too much credit." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, but Marcus caught something else underneath it, a loneliness that mirrored his own. "And your father?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Sophia's expression darkened slightly. "He left when I was 5. Said he couldn't handle having a sick kid." She said it matter-of-factly, as if she'd repeated the explanation many times before. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he'd thought long dead. "Sick? I have this thing with my blood," Sophia explained, unconsciously touching her arm where Marcus could see the faint outline of medical tape. "It doesn't work right. Mom says I'm special, but special is just another word for different, and different usually means alone." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Here was a child whose blood was failing her, sitting next to a creature who had been sustained by blood for centuries. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "Your mother is right," Marcus said quietly. "Special doesn't have to mean alone." Sophia turned to look at him fully, and Marcus was struck again by the intelligence in her young eyes. "You're alone though, aren't you? I can tell. You have that same look Mom gets sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. Like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders and nobody else can see it." Marcus opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. What was the point in lying to someone who saw so clearly? "I've been alone for a very long time," he admitted. "How long?" Marcus almost smiled at the directness of the question. "Longer than you might believe." "Try me," Sophia said with a grin. "I'm pretty smart for an 8-year-old. 347 years, Marcus said, watching her face carefully. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. "Wow. That's a really long time. You must have seen some incredible things." No fear, no disbelief, just curiosity. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, like ice breaking up in spring. "Some incredible, some terrible," he said honestly. "Mom always says that life is like that, good and bad all mixed together like chocolate and vanilla ice cream. You can't really have one without the other. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in decades. There was something about this child that calmed the constant storm in his mind. "Marcus?" Sophia said eventually. "Yeah? Do you ever get tired of being alone?" The question hung in the air between them like a bridge Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to cross. "Every day," he whispered. "Me too," Sophia said softly. "Mom tries really hard, but she's always working or worried about money or taking me to doctor appointments. Sometimes I think it would be easier if I just wasn't around to be a problem anymore." The words hit Marcus like a stake through the heart. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. "Don't ever think that, Sophia. Your mother works those double shifts because you matter to her more than anything else in the world. Being special isn't being a problem, it's being precious." Sophia blinked in surprise at the passion in his voice. "You really think so?" "I know so. I've lived long enough to recognize love when I see it, and your mother loves you fiercely." "But what about you?" Sophia asked. "Who loves you?" The question was innocent, but it cut deeper than any weapon Marcus had ever faced. "No one," he said simply. "Not for a very long time." "That's not fair," Sophia said with the righteous indignation that only children could muster. "Everyone should have someone who loves them. The world isn't always fair, little one." "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean we can't make it better." Sophia stood up and brushed off her school skirt. "I have to go now. Mom will be here soon, and she worries if she can't find me right away." Marcus nodded, already feeling the loneliness creeping back in as she prepared to leave. "Marcus?" "Yes?" "Will you be here tomorrow? Same time?" Marcus hesitated. Getting attached to humans was dangerous, especially one as perceptive as this child. But the hope in her eyes was something he hadn't seen directed at him in centuries. "If you'd like me to be." "I would," Sophia said firmly. "And, Marcus? Tomorrow I'm going to tell you about my mom. I think you two would really like each other." Before Marcus could respond, she was skipping away toward the park entrance, her yellow ribbon bouncing with each step. He watched until she disappeared around the corner, then sat back against the bench with a long sigh. For the first time in decades, Marcus found himself looking forward to tomorrow. It was a dangerous feeling for someone like him, but as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, he decided that maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. The next evening came faster than Marcus expected. He found himself arriving at the park early, settling onto the same bench with an anticipation he hadn't felt since he was human. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter, and the park was quieter than usual. Sophia appeared at exactly the same time as the day before, but today she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a woman who could only be her mother. Marcus recognized the tiredness in her shoulders, the way she moved like someone who was always on alert, always ready to respond to the next crisis. Dr. Elena Martinez was beautiful in the way that came from strength rather than just genetics. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore scrubs under a worn leather jacket. She had the same intelligent eyes as her daughter, but they held a wariness that life had taught her. "Mom, this is Marcus," Sophia announced, pulling her mother toward the bench. "The one I told you about." Elena's eyes swept over Marcus, taking in his expensive clothes, his too pale skin, the way he moved with predatory grace even while sitting still. Her instincts as both a mother and a medical professional were clearly on high alert. "Sophia mentioned she met someone new," Elena said carefully, positioning herself slightly in front of her daughter. "I wanted to thank you for being kind to her, but I also need to ask that you understand my concerns about adult strangers talking to my child." Marcus stood slowly, recognizing the protective mother bear stance. "Your concerns are completely justified, Dr. Martinez. I'm not in the habit of befriending children, but your daughter has a unique ability to see past people's defenses." "It's Ms. Martinez," Elena corrected automatically. "And yes, she does. Sometimes too much for her own good." "Mom," Sophia protested. Marcus isn't dangerous. He's just lonely. Like us. Elena's expression softened slightly at her daughter's words, but her guard remained up. Sophia, why don't you go play on the swings for a few minutes? I'd like to talk to Marcus alone. Sophia looked between the two adults, clearly wanting to protest, but something in her mother's tone told her not to argue. 5 minutes, she negotiated. Then, we all talk together, okay? After Sophia reluctantly headed toward the playground, Elena sat down on the bench, maintaining careful distance from Marcus. I'm going to be direct, she said. My daughter has a condition that makes her vulnerable. She doesn't always pick up on social cues that other kids would, and she tends to trust too easily. If you're looking for an easy target, I'm not, Marcus interrupted quietly. And, your daughter's condition doesn't make her vulnerable, it makes her extraordinary. She sees the world more clearly than most adults. Elena studied his face, searching for deception. What is it you want from her? From us? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Sophia on the swings. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Elena look at him more carefully. I want nothing from either of you. Yesterday, your daughter asked me if I was okay, and, for the first time in centuries, someone saw past the mask I wear. I didn't seek her out, she found me. And, for reasons I don't fully understand, she seems to think I'm worth her time. Centuries? Elena caught the word, her medical mind cataloging the oddity. Marcus smiled ruefully. A figure of speech. Though some days it feels accurate. Elena was quiet, processing. As a nurse, she developed good instincts about people. You had to when you worked in an emergency room. Something about Marcus set off alarm bells, but not the kind that warned of danger to her daughter. It was something else, something she couldn't quite name. You said lonely, she said finally. Like us. What did you mean? Marcus looked at her directly for the first time, and Elena was struck by the depth of sadness in his dark eyes. When was the last time you had a conversation with another adult that wasn't about medical bills, work schedules, or Sophia's treatment plan? The question hit closer to home than Elena cared to admit. I don't see how that's relevant. Your daughter sees everything, Ms. Martinez. She knows you sacrifice for her, she knows you're tired, and she knows you're lonely. She worries about you as much as you worry about her. Elena felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She's 8 years old. She shouldn't have to worry about me. But she does. Because she loves you, and children who face medical challenges often grow up faster than they should. They learn to read the adults around them, to gauge moods and stress levels because their survival depends on it. The accuracy of his observation made Elena uncomfortable. You seem to know a lot about sick children. I know about survival, Marcus said simply. And I know about the weight of keeping others from seeing your struggles. Elena found herself really looking at Marcus for the first time. Past the expensive clothes and the unusual pallor, past her protective instincts. What she saw surprised her, a man carrying a burden so heavy it had carved lines around his eyes that spoke of pain far older than his apparent age. What kind of work do you do? She asked, her tone slightly less guarded. Marcus hesitated. He couldn't exactly tell her he was a vampire who survived by running a network of nighttime businesses that catered to New York's supernatural community. I work in night management. Security consulting for businesses that operate unusual hours. It wasn't entirely a lie. Elena nodded, accepting the vague explanation. And, you have no family? None that are still. Marcus paused, searching for the right word. Available. Sophia came bounding back before Elena could ask more questions, her cheeks flushed from the cool air and exercise. Are you done talking about me like I'm not here? She asked with a grin that was too knowing for her 8 years. Elena laughed despite herself. We weren't, Mom. You get that look when you're trying to figure out if someone's going to hurt me or help me. It's okay. You're just being a good mom. Marcus watched the interaction between mother and daughter with fascination. There was such easy love between them, such understanding despite the obvious stress they were both under. Marcus, Sophia said, settling between the two adults. Tell Mom about being alone for so long. Maybe she can help. Sophia, Elena warned. That's not, it's alright, Marcus said. Your daughter has this idea that loneliness is something that can be fixed. Can't it be? Sophia asked. I mean, we're all lonely, right? You're lonely, Mom's lonely, I'm lonely. But, we're all here together right now, and I don't feel lonely anymore. So maybe it is something that can be fixed. Elena stared at her daughter in amazement. Sometimes Sophia's insight was so profound it took her breath away. It's not always that simple, sweetheart, Elena said gently. Why not? Sophia pressed. Marcus, you said yesterday that being special doesn't have to mean being alone. Well, you're special too. Different. I can tell. And, Mom, you're definitely special, you save people's lives. So why can't we all be special together instead of alone? Marcus felt that crack in his chest widening. Your daughter has a point, he said to Elena. Though I'm not sure what she's proposing. I'm proposing friendship, Sophia said firmly. Real friendship. The kind where you check on each other and share things and make sure nobody stays sad for too long. Elena looked between her daughter and Marcus, seeing something in both of them that she recognized in herself, the bone-deep weariness of carrying burdens alone. I work a lot, she said slowly. Sophia spends a lot of time by herself or with neighbors. And I can't remember the last time I had a friend who wasn't also trying to sell me something or fix my daughter. I don't need fixing, Sophia said indignantly. No, you don't, Elena agreed quickly. But other people often think they know what's best for us. Marcus understood that feeling intimately. And, Marcus, Sophia continued, turning to him. You need people who won't run away when they find out you're different. Right? Marcus nodded slowly. Right. So it's settled, Sophia announced with satisfaction. We're friends now. Marcus, can you stay for dinner? We're having spaghetti and it's really good. Mom makes the sauce from scratch. Elena opened her mouth to protest. They barely knew this man, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Sophia's face lit up with hope, or the careful way Marcus held himself, as if he expected to be turned away. If Marcus would like to join us, she heard herself saying, he's welcome. The surprise on Marcus's face was almost comical. That's very kind, but I don't want to impose. You're not imposing if we invited you, Sophia said pragmatically. Right, Mom? Elena found herself smiling. Right. Our apartment is small, but there's always room for one more at our table. As they walked through the park toward Elena's car, Sophia skipping between the two adults, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. He felt like he might be going home. The feeling was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Elena's apartment was exactly what Marcus had expected, small, clean, and filled with the evidence of a life lived on careful budget. Medical bills were stacked neatly on a corner desk, homework was spread across the kitchen table, and the refrigerator was covered in Sophia's artwork alongside appointment reminders and work schedules. What he hadn't expected was how welcoming it felt. Make yourself at home, Elena said, hanging up her jacket and immediately moving into the efficient rhythm of someone used to managing multiple tasks. Sophia, homework first, then you can help with dinner. Can Marcus see my room? Sophia asked hopefully. I want to show him my book collection. Elena paused, her protective instincts warring with her daughter's obvious excitement. Maybe after dinner, sweetheart. Let Marcus get settled first. Marcus found himself studying the family photos that lined the hallway, pictures of Sophia at various ages, always with Elena, often in hospital settings. He noticed there were no photos of the father Sophia had mentioned. Coffee? Elena offered, moving around the small kitchen with practiced efficiency. Please. Marcus settled carefully on the worn couch, hyper-aware of his own strength in the small space. Everything here seemed fragile, precious in its normalcy. Sophia curled up at the other end of the couch with her math homework, occasionally glancing up at Marcus as if making sure he was really there. So, Elena said, bringing him a steaming mug, Sophia tells me you've lived in New York for a long time. Most of my life, Marcus answered truthfully. He'd arrived in New York in 1847, when it was still a very different city. And, you work nights? Exclusively. I have a condition that makes daytime difficult. Elena's medical curiosity was immediately piqued. What kind of condition? Marcus paused, considering how much truth he could share. Severe photosensitivity. Direct sunlight can be dangerous for me. It wasn't entirely a lie. Sunlight would kill him, though not in the way Elena would assume. That must be challenging, Elena said sympathetically. There are some genetic conditions that cause extreme light sensitivity. Have you seen a specialist? I've learned to manage it, Marcus said carefully. It's been with me for a very long time. Sophia looked up from her homework. Is that why you looked so sad yesterday? Because you can't go out in the sun? Marcus smiled at her directness. Partly. Being different can be lonely. But, you're not different bad, Sophia said firmly. You're different special. Like me. Elena watched the exchange with growing curiosity. There was something about Marcus that didn't quite add up, but Sophia had taken to him with an ease that surprised her. Her daughter was usually more cautious with strangers. Sophia's condition affects her blood, Elena found herself explaining. She has a rare form of anemia that doesn't respond well to traditional treatments. Marcus went very still. What kind of anemia? It's complicated, Elena said, automatically falling into medical mode. Her bone marrow doesn't produce healthy red blood cells efficiently. She needs regular transfusions and monitoring. The irony hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was a child whose blood was failing her, and he was a creature whose very existence depended on blood. The universe's sense of humor was becoming increasingly dark. Is it painful? He asked softly. Sometimes, Sophia said matter-of-factly. But Mom always makes sure I have the good pain medicine. And I get to miss school for hospital days, which is kind of nice. Elena's expression tightened slightly. The treatments are expensive. But we manage. Marcus heard what she wasn't saying. They were struggling financially. Elena was working double shifts at the hospital, probably picking up every extra hour she could get, just to keep up with Sophia's medical bills. I'm hungry, Sophia announced, closing her math book. Can we start dinner now? I want Marcus to try Mom's famous spaghetti sauce. It's hardly famous, Elena laughed, but she moved toward the kitchen anyway. Marcus, I hope you like garlic. I tend to use a lot of it. Marcus's smile was genuine. Garlic doesn't bother me at all. Another vampire myth proved wrong. Garlic was merely a seasoning to his kind, though he'd never corrected humans who believed otherwise. It was safer to let them keep their misconceptions. As Elena began cooking, Sophia appointed herself tour guide, showing Marcus around their small apartment. Her room was tiny but bright, with bookshelves that reached to the ceiling and a desk covered in art supplies. I like to read, Sophia explained, gesturing to the impressive collection of books. Mom says reading is traveling without leaving home. Since I can't travel much because of my treatments, I go lots of places in books. Marcus examined the shelves with interest. Classic literature mixed with modern children's books, medical journals that were probably Elena's, and an surprising number of books about mythology and folklore. You like myths and legends, he observed, noting several books about vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. They're interesting, Sophia said with a shrug. I mean, they're not real, but they're about people who are different and misunderstood. I relate to that. Marcus picked up a book about vampire folklore, flipping through pages of illustrations and descriptions. Most of it was wildly inaccurate, but the core idea was there: creatures living hidden among humans, sustained by what others took for granted. What do you think about them? He asked carefully. Vampires, I mean. Sophia considered the question seriously. I think they're probably lonely. I mean, if they were real, they'd have to hide what they are all the time. That would be hard. And everyone would be afraid of them, even if they didn't want to hurt anyone. The insight was so accurate it took Marcus's breath away. You don't think they'd be monsters? I think monster is just a word people use when they're afraid of something they don't understand, Sophia said with the wisdom of someone who'd been called different her entire short life. Maybe vampires just need blood to live, like I need transfusions. That doesn't make them evil, just different. Marcus had to turn away to compose himself. In 8 years, this child had developed a more nuanced understanding of his kind than most humans managed in a lifetime. Dinner's ready. Elena called from the kitchen. The meal was simple but delicious. Marcus found himself relaxing as they ate, listening to Sophia chatter about school and Elena share stories from the hospital. It had been decades since he'd sat at a family table, centuries since he'd felt this kind of easy acceptance. Marcus, Sophia said suddenly, what was your family like? Before you were alone? Elena shot her daughter a warning look. Sophia, that might be too personal. It's all right, Marcus said quietly. He looked at Sophia, seeing genuine curiosity rather than mere nosiness. I had a sister once. She was about your age when I lost her. What happened? Sophia asked gently. She got sick, Marcus said, the old pain still sharp after all these years. This was a long time ago, when medicine wasn't as advanced as it is now. There was nothing the doctors could do. Elena reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. The gesture was small, but it meant everything. I'm sorry, she said softly. Losing a sibling is devastating, especially a child. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. He hadn't talked about Catherine in over a century. The memory of her death, the reason he'd agreed to become what he was, still cut deep. Is that why you're so sad? Sophia asked. Because you miss her? Partly, Marcus admitted. I made some choices after she died that I thought would help, but they ended up making things complicated. What kind of choices? Elena started to interrupt, but Marcus held up a hand. There was something cathartic about talking to someone who listened without judgment. I decided I never wanted to feel that powerless again, he said carefully. So I sought out someone who promised me strength, promised me I'd never have to watch someone I loved die. But it didn't work out the way you hoped, Sophia said with intuitive understanding. No. It turned out that kind of strength comes with a very high price. And the person who made me the promise, they didn't tell me everything I needed to know. Elena was listening intently now, reading between the lines of what sounded like an abusive relationship or dangerous involvement with some kind of group. Are you still involved with these people? She asked, her protective instincts extending to this strange man who'd somehow wandered into their lives. No. I've been on my own for a very long time now. Good, Sophia said firmly. People who lie to you about important stuff aren't really your friends. Marcus almost smiled at the simple wisdom. No, they're not. After dinner, while Elena cleaned up despite Marcus's offers to help, Sophia curled up next to him on the couch with one of her mythology books. Can you read to me? She asked. Mom usually does, but she's tired tonight, and you have a really nice voice. Marcus glanced toward the kitchen where Elena was moving slowly, the exhaustion clear in every line of her body. What would you like me to read? Sophia flipped to a story about a lonely vampire who befriended a human child. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. As Marcus read, his voice low and soothing, Elena found herself pausing in her cleaning to listen. There was something almost hypnotic about the way he spoke, as if he'd done this many times before. Marcus? Sophia asked when the story ended. If vampires were real, and one of them was lonely like you, and they met a family like us, do you think they could be friends? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, acutely aware that Elena had stopped moving in the kitchen and was listening. I think, he said carefully, that anyone capable of loving a child the way your mother loves you would be capable of looking past differences that might scare other people. Even really big differences? Even really big ones. Elena came back into the living room, drying her hands on a dish towel. Sophia, it's time for your medicine and, then, bed. Sophia groaned dramatically but obediently got up to get her evening medications. Elena disappeared into the bathroom to prepare them, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. When she returned, Sophia took her pills without complaint, though Marcus could see they made her slightly nauseous. Will you come back tomorrow? Sophia asked as Elena started the bedtime routine. Marcus looked at Elena, not wanting to overstep. If your mother doesn't mind. I don't mind, Elena said softly. Sophia's right, we're all too isolated. Maybe friendship is something we could all use more of. As Marcus prepared to leave, Sophia gave him a quick hug that nearly brought him to his knees with its simple acceptance. Thank you for dinner, he said to Elena at the door. And, for letting me be here. Thank you for making my daughter smile more in one evening than I've seen in weeks, Elena replied. She needs that. So do I, Marcus admitted. More than you know. Walking home through the empty streets, Marcus felt something shifting inside him. For the first time in centuries, he had something to look forward to. It was dangerous, caring for humans always was, especially when they could never know the truth about what he was. But, as he thought about Sophia's accepting smile and Elena's cautious kindness, he decided that maybe some risks were worth taking. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that Marcus had never experienced before. Every evening, he met Elena and Sophia at the park, and, more often than not, he was invited back to their apartment for dinner. He began bringing groceries, claiming he wanted to contribute but, knowing that Elena's budget was stretched thin. Elena gradually relaxed around him, though he often caught her watching him with curious eyes, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle. Sophia simply accepted him as if he'd always been part of her life. Marcus found himself learning about human normalcy in ways that both delighted and terrified him. He helped Sophia with homework, listened to Elena vent about difficult patients and impossible schedules, and slowly began to feel like he belonged somewhere. But the hunger was always there, a constant reminder of what he was. He'd been feeding carefully, taking only what he needed from blood banks and medical waste, but being around Elena and Sophia every day was testing his control in ways he hadn't expected. Not because he wanted to hurt them, the thought was abhorrent, but because being close to their warmth, their life, their essential humanity made his own cold existence feel even more pronounced. It was Elena who noticed the changes first. You look tired, she said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Sophia was in her room, supposedly reading but probably drawing. Marcus paused in drying dishes. Elena was studying him with her medical professional eyes, taking in details he'd hoped weren't obvious. I haven't been sleeping well, he said, which was true enough. He didn't sleep much anyway, but lately he'd been even more restless. When was the last time you saw a doctor? Elena asked. I mean, really saw one, not just managed your photosensitivity condition. Marcus almost smiled at her persistence. It's been a while. Marcus, you're pale even for someone who avoids sunlight. And you're cold, I've noticed when we accidentally touch. That could indicate circulation problems, anemia, any number of conditions. The concern in her voice made his chest tight. When was the last time someone had worried about his health? I appreciate your concern, he said carefully, but my condition is unique. Traditional medicine doesn't really apply. Elena frowned. Every condition has some basis in medical science. Even the rarest diseases. Mom, are you trying to doctor Marcus again? Sophia appeared in the doorway, grinning at them both. I'm not trying to doctor anyone, Elena protested. I'm just saying that everyone should have regular medical care. Maybe Marcus doesn't like doctors, Sophia said pragmatically. Some people don't. That's okay, right, Marcus? Marcus looked between mother and daughter, seeing the love that drove Elena's concern and Sophia's protective instincts. They were both trying to take care of him in their own ways. It's not that I don't like doctors, he said slowly. It's just that my particular situation is complicated. Elena was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay. But if you ever want to talk about it, or if you need help finding a specialist who might understand complicated cases, let me know. I will, Marcus promised, though they all knew he was unlikely to follow through. Later, after Sophia was asleep and Elena was grading some continuing education coursework, Marcus found himself standing at her apartment window, looking out at the city lights. Regrets? Elena asked softly, joining him at the window. About what? Whatever choices you made that you mentioned before. The ones that made things complicated. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Every day, he finally said. But, also, if I hadn't made those choices, I would never have lived long enough to meet you and Sophia. So maybe even the worst decisions can lead to something good eventually. Elena studied his profile in the dim light. Marcus, can I ask you something, and will you give me an honest answer? He turned to face her fully. You can ask. Are you in some kind of trouble? Are there people looking for you, people who might want to hurt you or anyone close to you? The question was so perceptive it took Marcus aback. Elena was clearly thinking like a protective mother, trying to assess whether his presence put Sophia at risk. No one is looking for me, he said honestly. And I would never do anything to put either of you in danger. If I thought my being here could hurt you or Sophia, I would disappear tonight and you'd never see me again. The intensity in his voice convinced Elena more than any reassurance could have. But, you're not going to disappear. It wasn't a question, and Marcus realized that somewhere along the way, Elena had begun to trust him. The thought was both humbling and terrifying. Not unless you want me to, he said quietly. Elena smiled, the first completely relaxed smile he'd seen from her. Good. Because Sophia would never forgive me if I let you disappear. And, honestly, neither would I. Standing there in the quiet apartment, with Sophia sleeping peacefully down the hall and Elena's trust settling around him like a warm blanket, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. He was going to stay. Whatever the risks, whatever the complications, he was going to fight for the small piece of happiness he'd accidentally found. The hunger could be managed. The secrets could be kept. And, maybe, just maybe, he could learn to live with being different while still being part of a family. For the first time in 3 centuries, Marcus began to believe in hope. 3 months into their unusual friendship, everything changed on a Tuesday night in November. Sophia had been unusually tired all week, her latest blood work showing concerning numbers that had Elena making hushed phone calls to specialists. Marcus could smell the weakness in her blood, the way her body was struggling to keep up with basic functions. He was reading to her on the couch when she suddenly went limp, her book sliding to the floor as her eyes rolled back. Sophia! Elena rushed from the kitchen where she'd been preparing dinner, her medical training kicking in immediately. She checked Sophia's pulse, her breathing, the color of her lips and fingernails. Call 911, she said tersely to Marcus, already moving to get her medical bag. Marcus pulled out his phone, but, even as he dialed, he could hear Sophia's heart struggling, the irregular rhythm that spoke of a body shutting down. He'd heard that sound before, centuries ago, in another young girl who couldn't be saved by human medicine. The paramedics arrived within minutes, efficient and professional as they worked to stabilize Sophia. Elena rode in the ambulance, leaving Marcus to follow in his car through the empty streets. At the hospital, Marcus found himself in the surreal position of sitting in a waiting room while the only people who mattered to him fought for one small girl's life. He'd faced down armies, survived plagues, outlived empires, but he'd never felt as helpless as he did in that sterile corridor. Dr. James Richardson, Sophia's hematologist, emerged from the treatment area looking grim. Marcus watched as he spoke quietly with Elena, saw her face crumble as she received news no mother should ever hear. Her counts are the lowest we've ever seen, Elena told Marcus when she finally came to the waiting room, her voice hollow with exhaustion. She needs an immediate transfusion, but even that might only buy us time. Dr. Richardson wants to try an experimental treatment, but what? It's expensive. Very expensive. And there's no guarantee it'll work. Elena's laugh was bitter. I've already mortgaged everything we have for her treatments. I don't know how to get the money for this. Marcus felt something cold and decisive settle over him. How much? Marcus, no. I wasn't telling you this because I wanted how much, he repeated quietly. Elena named a figure that would have been devastating for most families. For Marcus, who had 3 centuries of carefully invested wealth, it was pocket change. Done, he said simply. Elena stared at him. You can't just I can, and I will. What do I need to do? Marcus, that's too much money. I can't let you, Elena. Marcus turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. That little girl in there called me family when I'd forgotten what the word meant. She offered me hope when I thought I was beyond saving. There is nothing I wouldn't do for her." Elena was quiet for a long moment, tears running down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for us? You barely know us." Marcus thought about all the ways he could answer that question. He could tell her about the loneliness that had been eating him alive for centuries. He could explain how Sophia's acceptance had given him something to live for beyond mere existence. He could try to make her understand that helping them was as much about saving himself as it was about saving Sophia. Instead, he simply said, "Because you're my family now." The experimental treatment worked, but it left Sophia weak and requiring constant monitoring. Elena took extended leave from her job to care for her daughter, and Marcus quietly arranged for her bills to be paid and her mortgage satisfied. When Elena tried to talk to him about repayment plans, Marcus cut her off gently but firmly. "The only thing I want in return is to continue being part of your family," he said. "Everything else is just money." It was during Sophia's recovery that she began asking the questions Marcus had been dreading. "Marcus," she said one evening as he sat with her while Elena slept, "why don't you ever eat with us anymore?" Marcus paused in reading her bedtime story. He'd been trying to avoid mealtimes, the smell of food making his hunger more pronounced when he was stressed about Sophia's condition. "I eat differently than you do," he said carefully. "Different how?" Sophia was looking at him with those two perceptive eyes, and Marcus realized she'd been watching him more carefully than he'd thought. "You never eat during the day," she continued. "You never eat regular food. And you only drink that dark stuff you bring in thermos bottles." Marcus's blood went cold. He'd thought he'd been more careful than that. "You're really smart," he said instead of answering directly. "Smart enough to know you're not telling me something important," Sophia said with 8-year-old directness. "Are you sick? Like, really sick?" "Not sick exactly," Marcus said slowly. "Just different." "Different how?" Sophia pressed. "And don't say it's complicated. I'm smart enough for complicated." Marcus looked at this small, brave girl who'd been through more medical procedures than most adults, who faced her own mortality with courage he envied, and made a decision that went against every survival instinct he'd developed over 3 centuries. "If I tell you something that sounds impossible," he said quietly, "something that might frighten other people, will you promise to let me explain before you decide what you think about it?" Sophia nodded solemnly. "I promise." Marcus took an unnecessary breath and spoke the words he'd never said to a human being in over 300 years. "I'm a vampire, Sophia." Sophia blinked at him, processing this information. "Like in my books?" "Some things like in your books. Many things different." "Do you hurt people?" "I try very hard not to. I get what I need from blood banks and medical waste. I've never hurt anyone who didn't try to hurt me first." "Are you going to hurt me or Mom?" "Never," Marcus said with absolute conviction. "I would rather die than cause either of you pain." Sophia was quiet for several minutes, thinking this through with the same careful consideration she applied to difficult math problems. "Is that why you can't go out in the sun?" she asked finally. "Yes." "And why you're so cold all the time?" "Yes." "And why you don't age like normal people?" Marcus paused. "How did you?" "I found some really old pictures in Mom's medical books about blood diseases. There's one from like 50 years ago, and there's a man in the background who looks exactly like you." "Exactly." The observation was so astute it took Marcus's breath away. Sophia had been putting together clues for weeks, maybe months. "Does Mom know?" Sophia asked. "No. And I need you to understand why I can't tell her, at least not yet. Because she's a doctor and she'd think you were crazy or dangerous." "Exactly." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "But you told me because you trust me to understand." "I told you because you deserve the truth. You've been so honest with me about your condition, about how it feels to be different. I owed you the same honesty. Are there others like you?" "Yes, but I don't associate with them anymore. Most vampires, they're not interested in the kind of life I want to live." "What kind of life do you want to live?" Marcus smiled at her. This kind. With people who matter to me. With family. Sophia was quiet again, absorbing everything. When she spoke, her question surprised him. Does being a vampire make you sad? Sometimes. It can be very lonely. But, not anymore, right? Because you have us now. Right, Marcus said softly. Not anymore. Good, Sophia said with satisfaction. Because we have you too, and that makes us less lonely. She reached over and took his cold hand in her warm one, squeezing gently. Marcus? Can I ask you something else? Of course. When I needed the transfusion, and I was really sick, did you think about, using your vampire abilities to help me somehow? The question hit him like a physical blow because he had thought about it. He'd considered every desperate option, including the possibility of turning her, before discarding the idea as monstrous. I thought about it, he admitted. But being a vampire isn't a cure, Sophia. It's a different kind of condition, one that comes with costs I would never ask you to pay. What kind of costs? You'd have to give up sunlight forever. You'd have to drink blood to survive. You'd watch everyone you love age and die while you stayed the same. And, most importantly, you wouldn't be you anymore. The Sophia I love, curious, kind, brave, human Sophia, would be gone. But, I'd still be alive. You'd still exist, Marcus corrected gently. But, existence isn't the same as living. Trust me on that. Sophia nodded, accepting his wisdom on the subject. So if something happens to me, you won't try to save me that way. No. But, I will fight with everything I have to save you in every other way possible. Promise? Promise. Elena's voice came from the doorway, soft but shaken. Sophia, sweetheart, can you give Marcus and me a few minutes to talk? Marcus's heart sank as he realized Elena had been standing there, had heard at least part of their conversation. Sophia squeezed his hand once more before obediently heading to the bathroom to brush her teeth. Elena came into the room and sat down where Sophia had been, her face unreadable. How much of that did you hear? Marcus asked quietly. Enough, Elena said. Enough to understand that my 8-year-old daughter has been keeping some very big secrets. Marcus waited, not sure whether he was about to be thrown out of their lives forever. A vampire, Elena said finally. That's your explanation for everything. The photosensitivity, the cold skin, the fact that you never seem to eat, the way you move like you're not quite bound by the same physical laws as everyone else. I know how it sounds. Do you? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you really? Because what it sounds like is either an elaborate delusion or the most impossible truth I've ever heard. Marcus looked at her directly. Which do you think it is? Elena was quiet for a long time, her medical mind warring with everything she'd observed about Marcus over the past months. I think, she said slowly, that you've never lied to me about anything important. I think you've been honest about being different, about having a condition that complicates your life, about the choices you made that you regret. I think you saved my daughter's life twice, once with money and once by giving her someone who understands what it feels like to be different. She paused, studying his face. I also think that if you wanted to hurt us, you've had months of opportunities and you've never done anything but protect us. So either you're the most elaborate con artist in history, or you're telling the truth about something that shouldn't be possible. And, which do you believe? Elena reached out and touched his hand, feeling the marble coldness of his skin, the complete absence of a pulse in his wrist. I believe my daughter sees things more clearly than most adults, she said quietly. And, she trusts you completely. That matters more to me than whether or not vampires fit into my understanding of the world. Marcus stared at her in amazement. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, Elena admitted. But, not of you. I'm afraid of what this means for Sophia, for us, for any kind of normal future. But, I'm not afraid of who you are. Elena, I need you to understand, nothing changes. I'm still the same person who's been having dinner with you for months, who reads bedtime stories and helps with homework. I'm still the person who would do anything to protect you and Sophia. I know, Elena said softly. But everything changes too, doesn't it? Because now I know what you are, and what you've given up to be part of our lives. I haven't given up anything. I've gained everything. Elena smiled, the first genuine smile since their conversation began. Sophia was right about you, wasn't she? You really did need a family. More than I ever realized. Sophia appeared back in the doorway, clearly having waited as long as her 8-year-old patience would allow. Are you done talking about me? She asked with a grin. And, did you tell Mom that Marcus is really, really old and has probably seen some amazing things? Elena laughed despite everything. Yes, we covered that. Good. So can Marcus still read me my story? Because I want to know what happens to the Dragon Princess. As Marcus settled back into his chair and opened the book, Elena curled up in the other chair to listen. The scene was so perfectly normal, a family sharing bedtime stories, that for a moment Marcus could almost forget how extraordinary their situation really was. Marcus? Sophia said as he finished the chapter. Yes? I'm glad you told me the truth. It makes us better friends when we can be honest about who we really are. I agree, Marcus said, meeting Elena's eyes over Sophia's head. And, Marcus? Next time we go to the park, can you show me some of your vampire super speed? Just a little bit? Elena started to protest, but Marcus was already laughing. We'll see what we can do. Later, after Sophia was asleep and Elena was finishing her evening routine, she found Marcus standing at the window again, looking out at the city. Regrets? She asked, echoing their conversation from weeks earlier. Marcus turned to look at her, this woman who had accepted the impossible truth about him with remarkable grace. No regrets, he said firmly. For the first time in centuries, no regrets at all. Elena joined him at the window, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. So what happens now? Elena asked eventually. Now we keep being a family, Marcus said simply. We keep taking care of each other. We keep making sure Sophia grows up knowing she's loved and protected. We keep proving that different doesn't have to mean alone. And if people find out what you are? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Then, I'll make sure you and Sophia are somewhere safe before I deal with any problems that might create. Marcus Elena, I've survived 3 centuries because I know how to protect myself. But, I've never had anything worth protecting before. That changes everything. Elena reached out and took his cold hand in her warm one, just as Sophia had done earlier. You're not alone anymore, she said quietly. Whatever problems come, we face them together. That's what family does. Marcus looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how something so simple could mean so much. I love you both, he said, the words carrying the weight of centuries of loneliness. More than you could possibly know. We love you too, Elena replied. Vampire and all. Standing there in the quiet apartment, with Sophia sleeping peacefully down the hall and Elena's acceptance surrounding him like warmth, Marcus finally understood what he'd been searching for through all those dark centuries. He'd found his way home. 6 months later, the 3 of them were still an unusual family, but they worked. Sophia's condition had stabilized with her new treatment, Elena had returned to work part-time, and Marcus had settled into a life he'd never imagined possible. He still fed carefully, still avoided daylight, still carried the weight of what he was. But he also helped with homework, attended school plays, and learned the strange joy of belonging somewhere. The park bench where they'd first met had become a regular stop on their evening walks. Sometimes Sophia would run ahead to play while Marcus and Elena talked, and sometimes all 3 of them would sit together, watching the world go by. You know, Sophia said one evening as they sat on their bench, I was thinking about that first day we met. What about it? Marcus asked. I told you that you could take my mom for a while. Like, if you needed someone to care about. I remember. But, it turned out backwards, didn't it? We ended up taking you for a while instead. Marcus smiled at her logic. I suppose it did. Good, Sophia said with satisfaction. I like our way better. Elena reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. so do I. As the sun set over the city and the first stars began to appear, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. A vampire, a nurse, and a brave little girl had somehow found each other in a city of millions and created something that shouldn't have been possible. They'd created a family built on acceptance, understanding, and love that transcended every difference between them. And, for the first time in 3 centuries, Marcus knew exactly where he belonged.